the content for the day. As Jessica said, my name is Dianne Young, and I have spent the last 25 years working with all sizes of organizations. The main challenges that I have worked with organizations are everything from increasing profitability, reducing turnover, and really just helping organizations set and crash through the goals that they have. So I'm excited about the content for today. We're going to spend about 30 minutes, but make sure that you do use the chat pod, and at the end we'll go through some questions and answers. So the ultimate threat to organizational success isn't what most people think. It's not the markets, it's not technology, it's not your products, and it's not even really your competition. The ultimate threat to organizational success today is the company's ability to attract, lead, develop, and retain the best people. So how many of you recognize these two items? And usually I get some laughs when I ask this question, because if you've been in the workforce for a while, you're like, well, of course. But you might laugh, but my 21-year-old daughter could not identify that item on the right, that fax machine. She had never seen one before. Now, what about that ledger book? I am a Gen Xer, and so we used the ledger book in high school, even through college, and even on my first job. But today, that ledger book would look much different. Today, that ledger book is actually called Excel, and is part of Microsoft Word. So today's generations learn similar processes, but really they have much improved and better tools than we did. So I want you to think about this. Young people today who come into your organization or into the work environment in general, not being familiar with the terms and the processes, or the hundreds of acronyms that I see companies use. I love acronyms because companies think that it's a way of making things easier to remember, but it actually can be a deterrent sometimes when you've got acronym after acronym. So somebody coming in new to the work environment, do you think it could be a little uncomfortable for them if they're unfamiliar with the tools, the terms, the processes? If you think about it, it really could be. So it would be just like you or I walking into a room with tools and equipment that we have no idea how to use. And I've had that feeling before. I have walked into the break room and looked at a copy machine that had so many buttons and bells and whistles on it that I swear it could clone someone. I just walked away and asked for help. So you see, times have really changed. And as opposed to the fax machine, think about, how do we pass along information today? What do we do now? What has replaced the fax machine? Yeah, you can email, you can scan, you can take a picture and just send it right from your phone. So today, we are going to talk about our spectrum and where do things fall on that spectrum and how things have changed. So if you think back to a time earlier in your career where you had a technology or a procedure that was very different than today. I'll share one with you, and if anyone has one that they want to share, please just put it in the chat pod. For me, I remember early on in my career, I was in sales, and I would have to gather all of my receipts, and then I would tape them all on one piece of paper, and then I would make a photocopy of it, and then I would fax it in. Anybody remember doing something similar to that, where you actually had to photocopy something just so you could fax it? Yeah. I have other people that have told me, you know what? I remember Lotus Notes before Microsoft Office. Or I had a gentleman share with me that early in his career, he was a sales person that was out on the road a lot, and he kept an atlas or a map This was before GPS. He had to know how to get around. He had to know how to get to each of the clients he had to see that day. So he would actually take a highlighter and highlight that map for his route for the day. So now think about this too. For those of us who have lived through some of those dinosaur ages of technology, do you feel a little bit skewed when new employees come in now and they have it so easy? Yeah, okay. I mean, I know I do sometimes. Sometimes it feels like, wow, they didn't pay their dues. Everything is so easy for them. And it's natural for us to feel that way. But we have to keep in mind and remember that we don't know what we don't know. So thank goodness that technology has changed, because now we don't need a physical key to open up our car door. We don't need to physically crank the window down, especially where I live in Atlanta on a hot summer day. My 21-year-old also had never been in a vehicle that didn't have automatic windows until recently. And she just was astonished that people actually had to manually roll their windows down. But if you think about it, technology has advanced in every aspect of our life. So what used to just be part of what we did now is automated. So sometimes those of us who have lived through some of those more difficult experiences tend to judge, hold a little bit of resentment. If you could mute, please. Thank you. Hold a little bit of resentment to those who haven't had to go through some of those dinosaur ages in technology. So just be aware of this. I know that sometimes in the back of my mind, when I find myself thinking certain things, it's like, oh, but you know what? It's not their fault. They really didn't have to go through some of that because technology has advanced so much. So how many of you have ever bought or sold a home? I would assume most of us at some point in our life have either bought or sold or know of someone who has bought or sold a home. And we all know, if you've been in the home market, that sometimes it's a buyer's market and sometimes it's a seller's market. And it really just depends on a couple factors. First of all, the economic conditions at the time and supply and demand. So sometimes the buyers have the upper hand and sometimes the sellers do, and we just accept this. That's just the way the market is. We just hope that when it's our time to buy or sell a home, that we are on the good end of the stick. Now, it's the very same way for the employment market. So if you think about it, in the mid-2000s, we were very solidly in a recession. And it was much easier to find and keep talented people. They just weren't job hopping as much as we see today, because they were also concerned about their economic future and the condition of their household. So somewhere around early 2014, even late 2013, that trend dramatically shifted. And today we are solidly in an employee market where the employee has the upper hand. So how many of you that conduct interviews, onboard, hire, or even just have new people joining your team feel like the employee has the upper hand? Yeah, I know that I have in the last several years. So why do we feel this way? I've had a couple people share. One of the reasons that people feel this way is because most of the time people have multiple offers. So we're competing with multiple companies at the same time for the same people. So last year, I actually had the task of interviewing and hiring 15 interns for a healthcare recruiting firm. So I started in the fall going to the on-campus job fairs, did a round of interviews, phone interviews, in-person interviews, had them come on site, did background checks, and we hired 15 interns. After accepting the offers, I had 3 of them bow out the week before because they had better offers. And these are interns. So when people apply, they're not just applying to one place, are they? I mean, with a few clicks of the computer, you can literally apply to multiple positions at multiple companies all at one time. So that's really one of the reasons why we see it as such an employee market right now. So if the employees have the advantage, it's for a couple reasons. So let's talk a little bit about why they have the upper hand right now. The first reason that they have the advantage is really because there are jobs galore. Companies are hiring everyone from their frontline or their hourly employees all the way to executives. They're building their bench strength. They are, they are constantly having turnover and having to fill positions over and over again. So when you have an environment where there are a lot of jobs, people know that they can pick and choose if they're a qualified candidate. And that's absolutely what they're doing right now. We also have a shrinking labor force. So the baby boomers, who we're all familiar with, are now in their mid-50s to early 70s. And the baby boomers, that cohort is retiring at a rate of 10,000 a day in the US. So I want you to take a minute and just think about the people that you work with. How many people that you work with on your team or in your company are in that category where they're going to be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years? Most people have never thought of that or really looked around at what their company is going to look like in another 5 or 10 years, but it can be kind of alarming once you do start looking at that. And then I want you to think about your clients. How many of your clients are nearing that retirement age? Now, one other thing that we are seeing in the market right now is that people are staying in school longer. So back when I went to college, you went to school right out of high school, got your bachelor's degree, and really you were good to go. Graduated at 21, 22 years old, and off you went out into the world to make your mark. Today, we are seeing that people are staying in school longer. They're getting their master's, they're getting their doctorate or some sort of advanced degree. So a lot of times people are coming out at 25, 26, even 27 years old, instead of that 21 or 22 that we saw several years ago. So are any of you seeing that trend? Yeah. So let me ask you this too. If you're seeing that trend, are those potential employees that are coming out now with an advanced degree at the age of 25, 26, 27, with an enormous amount, usually of student loan debt, are they looking for and requiring higher salaries and more benefits? Yeah. They really are. Someone coming out of college at 21 or 22 typically wouldn't have a family or a mortgage or a lot of debt, but somebody coming out of school at 25, 26, or 27 could really be in that stage in their life where they have a mortgage, they have a family, and they have student loan debt. So now, the next reason that the employee really has the upper hand right now is because we have all of this accessible comparison information. And what I mean by that is we have websites like Glassdoor.com, Salary.com, LinkedIn, Indeed, where potential candidates can go on and find out as much as they can about you and your company before they even fill out the application. So they want to know what someone else has said about you, and they want to know that your company is worthwhile. We live in a society today where other people want others to vet things for them. We all rely on other people vetting where we spend our money, our time, so that we know it's going to be worth our while to do it or not. So the way that looks for me, because I travel all over the country doing trainings, and I eat out hundreds of times, if not more than that, is that if I'm traveling to Irvine, California, where I go quite a bit, and I want salmon kebabs, I can look on Yelp or a number of other sites and find Panini Kebab Grill and see what others have said about it before I even decide to go and spend my own money there. I can see how many stars they have. I can see the ratings and the comments that people have left. So because I want the most bang for my buck, and because I don't want to go somewhere and have the food not be good or have a great experience, I want to go where others have gone before and where people have told me the food is excellent, the service is great, you'll have a great experience. It's the same in the employment market. So Glassdoor, for those of you who are not familiar, is where your current and your former employees can rate you anonymously. And we all know that if you don't have to put your name on it, people will tell you things that they wouldn't tell you face to face. And I know this is going to shock some of you, but sometimes they don't even tell the truth because they know that the company cannot trace it back to them. So here's what we encourage you to do. First of all, go online, find your location, and make sure that you have a Glassdoor account. And then start putting some positive comments on your account, because that's really what people are looking for. You know, don't wait to do crisis management until there's a negative comment that's been posted. Because as an applicant, if I can't find your company online, what does that tell me? Well, it tells me you're not a trendsetter, not really that important. And you see, just like how I wanted to find ratings and reviews about restaurants before I go, people want to find you, but what if they find you and there are only negative comments? See, our natural instinct would be to try to figure out who posted it and blame them. Oh, they're a horrible employee. Or of course they wrote that. They didn't hit their numbers, or, you know, we were constantly having to work with that employee on their motivation or whatever it might be. But that doesn't help anything. So what we suggest is that you go on there if someone has posted a negative comment, and that you would reply to that by saying something similar to, you know, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Rest assured that we are working to correct all and any problems. And again, thank you for letting us know. We'll take you 2 seconds to do that. And what does that tell someone reading your Glassdoor account in those comments? Yeah, it tells them that you care and that you're being proactive. So that's really what employees are looking for today. They're looking for a company that cares about them as a person. They want their management team to be involved. It's important to them. So when do you think it would be a good time to ask your employees to go online and post a positive comment? What do you guys think? Yeah, when they're happy, definitely. When they get a raise, when they just came back from vacation, paid holidays, when they've completed a huge project. You can actually find all kinds of positive times, but those are the times that you want to have a positive comment put on Glassdoor. Another thing that you can do on Glassdoor is that you can have your employees rate your interview process. So you can ask new hires during their onboarding process to take just a couple minutes and go on Glassdoor and rate the interview process. So now, LinkedIn coaching. How many of you have been approached by someone on LinkedIn that says, wow, I see you have the skills and the experience that we are looking for. Would you be interested in a new opportunity? I know I have multiple times a week sometimes. Almost everyone in this webinar has probably had an interaction like that at some point in time if you're on LinkedIn. So if that's happening to us, it's definitely happening to our teams as well. So that's one of the reasons that it's so important to stay connected with your team. You've got to let them know that you appreciate them, and you've got to thank them, because the moment that they don't feel that connection and that appreciation, that just might be the day that they think, yeah, I think I'll look into a new opportunity. So finally, we have got the generational demographics. So let's talk a little bit about the shift in the workforce today. So we've got the baby boomers, and the baby boomers entered the workforce at 80 million strong. And they took us really from what I call the punch clock society to a just stay until the job is done. So what I mean by that is work was the #1 priority for the baby boomers. It was all about paying your dues, closing another deal, and doing whatever you had to do to get the job done. Also, here's what work ethic looks like. The baby boomers determined that. Here's what professionalism looks like. So think about this for a moment. How do you really define work ethic? Yeah, it could be somebody that really cares about their product, someone that takes accountability, shows up on time, reliable. Well, baby boomers are the ones that said that work ethic looks like you stay until the job gets done no matter what. So that has changed a lot over the course of the last 30, 40 years. So I want you to just always keep in mind that work ethic really is an opinion. So after the baby boomers, we had the Gen Xers. This is my generation. And the interesting thing about the Gen Xers is that we came into the workplace only 60 million strong. So we just did not have the numbers and strength to really say to our bosses, yeah, I'm not staying late tonight. Don't really want to do that. We really were kind of a silent generation. We didn't require a lot of hand-holding. We took our cues from the baby boomers. And many of us were told early on in our careers, wait it out, pay your dues, and your time will come. And that's what a lot of people did. Now, the game changer for all of us is the millennials. So they are 80 million strong. So 80 million millennials will be entering the workplace by 2020. And I'll do the math for all of you. That is in less than 8 months. The millennials will outnumber the boomers and the Xers in the workplace combined. So let that sink in for a moment. So if we look at this major shift, let's talk about what are the challenges of a workforce shift like this. So the #1 challenge is really a loss of institutional knowledge. That is the #1 challenge that we are seeing. So as we have people that are retiring out, do we have enough people with the organization that could easily step into the shoes of someone retiring? So again, I want you to think about your own team. If you were to walk out today, do you feel like there is enough experience, institutional knowledge that someone could easily step into your shoes? For most of us, probably not. We are losing institutional knowledge at a rate faster than we can replace it. The second challenge is the rising cost of turnover. So most organizations, no matter what industry, will say they are seeing more turnover. So if you have not yet figured the cost of turnover for different positions within your organization, I would encourage you to sit down and do that. And when you're figuring the cost of turnover, there are some things that you need to factor in, like the cost of recruitment, the cost of onboarding and ramping up, the cost of someone actually learning the skill set and being able to perform. Onboarding and ramping up is a process, depending on the company and the industry, anywhere from 6 to 18 months at a minimum. So rising cost of turnover is definitely a challenge with this workforce shift. And then we've got the continuity of work and service. So what if somebody leaves, and let's just say they're the head engineer and they leave? Is there a gap or a stop of some sort on the project that they were leading? Yeah. So hopefully the client or the customer would not see it on their end, but what are we doing behind the scenes to make sure that the customer or the client doesn't see? Yet we're killing ourselves. So we need to think about, do we have enough people in place to keep things moving if someone leaves? And then the last challenge that we see is that there are just fewer subject matter experts. So very prevalent in some industries more than others, but people used to stay in a job or at least the same industry for 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years. But what we're seeing today is that people are jumping from industry to industry. Now, the longer you stay with a company, the more subject matter expertise you have. So if you're jumping from industry to industry, again, there is a ramp up, and that's a missing component that we're seeing in organizations today. So now that I've spilled all the news to you, let's talk about what we can do as we face this new reality. First of all, what we do at Crescendo is constantly remind you that if you want new results, you have to have a new mindset. So just be prepared and open to try things in a different way. The first thing that we can do is not assume anything, okay? So don't assume that you know what's going on with your team. Ask them. Gather the information and take action. So I had a client recently that had a little more turnover than normal, and they were sure that it was because their people were leaving for more pay. But when they actually surveyed why people were leaving, it was not because of more pay. It was because of the lack of communication on the teams and the outdated technology. So in his mind, the owner thought, they're leaving for more pay. I can't compete with that. But the reality was they'd be willing to stay if they had better communication and if the company was willing to invest in better technology. So never assume that you know. And the other thing that is in our control is to communicate the expectations. So keep in mind that based on generations and experience levels, people may not, I know this might shock you, but they may not think the same way that you do. And they can't read our mind and we can't read theirs. I love a story that Cara shares about if you don't set proper communications and you tell someone to show up the first day of work in black pants, you will have someone show up the first day in black leggings. And you will be thinking, what on earth? Those are leggings. And they will be thinking, they cover from my waist to my ankles, they're pants. So it is critical to take the time to communicate your expectations, especially with new staff. And then the third thing that you can do is you can look at your online footprint. You can take those recommendations that I mentioned earlier. So go on there and look and see, what are people saying about your company? Do you have any positive comments from current employees? And what does your overall footprint look like? Because if they can't find information about your company, and we're talking more than just a website, they're not going to be interested and they're going to pass it over. So I want you to keep in mind, I started off the webinar with this quote. A lot of organizations think that it's technology, it's products, it's competition that is the real threat. But keep in mind that the ultimate threat to organizational success, it isn't the markets, it isn't technology, products, or competition. It absolutely is the ability to attract, to lead, to develop, and to retain the best people. And if we put some effort into that, we can all do a better job to reduce turnover. So I would like to, we are right at 30 minutes in, I would like to open it up to some Q&A and invite Jessica to come back on.
All right, you guys, that was awesome, Diane. Thank you so much for all the information. So I know there's got to be some people with some questions here because it was so relatable to our current work circumstance. So what kind of questions do you guys have for Diane? Anybody want to type anything over there? Okay, well, I have, I got one during the chat, and it is, do you have any tips for getting new hires up to speed faster?
Good question. And I always say if one person has asked it, there's probably many others that have thought it or are going through a similar situation. So, you know, at Crescendo Strategies, we do have a lot of tips. You can reach out to us, but let me just share a couple. The first thing would be to partner them up with someone have a mentor in the workplace. And I do want to caution you about this, because sometimes we think that if we partner new people up with the most successful person in the department, that, you know, that will be a great pairing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the most successful people in the department have bad habits, have negative attitudes, have gone through some things that maybe they're holding a chip on their shoulder. So I always encourage you to rotate the new person and have them sit or shadow a variety of people so that they can get a different perspective, so that they can ask questions to a variety of different people and kind of get a well-rounded feel for what the company is like. The other thing when it comes to ramping up the onboarding and getting new hires up faster is just to really examine your onboarding process. Is it a process? What does your onboarding look like? How many weeks do you have scheduled out for their onboarding? And again, at the very end, we will put up our information. So please feel free to reach out. If you need help with your onboarding, we're more than capable and would love to help you with that.
That's great, Diane. The next question that we have here is, do you see that it's a popular theme that companies still use the point system?
Okay, so if I could get clarification, the point system for what?
Okay, so the user 77019, if you can respond to that, we'll go ahead and cover another question and we can come back to that.
Okay, perfect.
So tell me what, this next question is from Robert, and he's asking what technologies are companies using to increase engagement with their employees? That's a great question.
That's a great question. So I think that primarily what we see is that it depends on the role. So if you're a sales organization, having some sort of a CRM that is user-friendly, that is easy to use. The other thing we're seeing is that employees want it to be mobile friendly. So they, you know, there's a continuity. Work doesn't just stop when you leave the office. People are checking emails at home. So having that continuity so that whatever platform you're using, they can check it from their phone, they can check it from an iPad. I would say for a sales organization, their contact management system, where you're keeping all of your information. For other types of companies, you know, it could be anywhere, anything from your telephone system all the way up to your accounting system. So how many times are you having to duplicate work? How many people touch a file before it goes in the pile and it's complete? Start to look at some of those procedures that you have and see if there is some technology. There's technology out there for everything. And I always often also caution companies, don't just get technology to get technology. Make sure that it is going to help to do something within your organization. So it's going to streamline a process. It's going to cut down on the time it takes to onboard a new person. It's going to help invoices go out quicker and have money come in faster. So again, if you want to reach out after, there are a variety, if I could know just a little more about your industry, but there are a variety of different technologies out there that can absolutely help with the attraction and retainment of employees.
Absolutely, totally agree. So going back to the last question, they wanted to clarify. So let me reread that question. Do you see that it's a popular theme that companies still use the point system, and then the user refined that saying tardy and absenteeism?
Yeah, you know, I didn't want to answer the question without knowing specifically. Sure. You know, I am finding that more and more organizations are getting away from that. And what they are doing is they are allowing their employees to have a bit more freedom, whether that's flex time. If you're an organization that's not quite there and you're not offering flex time or remote work from home, communicating better. So again, it just goes back to that communicating your expectations. So what I have found is that companies are getting away from the point system because it has a negative connotation.
Absolutely.
So what they're doing is if they have an issue with someone who is tardy a lot, or I actually had a similar situation, and they're sitting down with that employee and getting to know what the situation is. In my situation, I had an employee who was tardy quite often, several times a week. But once I sat down and found out, it was because she could not drop her son off at school till a certain time of day. She just couldn't. And so all we did was adjust her start time. She took a little bit shorter lunch and she still left at the same time. So just having some flexibility. The other thing is with Atlanta, where I live, the traffic is horrendous all the time. So it could take one small raindrop and traffic is going to have you 35, 40 minutes late for work. So I would say reevaluate the point system and look at setting clear expectations and then addressing individually if there seems to be a challenge with someone meeting those expectations. I think there are several positive ways that you can implement something like that rather than the point system.
Absolutely. And that just goes back to what you were saying during the webinar, is that you got to get to know your people. And
Yes.
I think that's a great connection. The next question is, what are some of the best practices you've seen for retaining staff, specifically within the first 90 days? That's a great question.
That is a great question. So a couple of the best practices that I can share with you are making sure that on day one, you have done some preparation before. So I just watched a really cool video where, on day one, the new hire came in and there was a balloon at their desk with a handwritten card from everyone in their department that just said, welcome, or we're excited to have you here. So you can just imagine that somebody that comes into an environment like that, how excited they're going to be versus someone that comes in and comes to their desk and there's, maybe a computer and a notepad and not much else. And they sit at their desk not knowing what they're to do next. So when it comes to that, I would say the onboarding, the new hires process starts before the new hires day one. So have a process in place. And then, again, for retention, it's all about getting to know your employees. Mm-hmm. Another tip that I could give you would be to recognize a job that is what we would call a stepping stone job and maybe not a career position. So an example that I can give you is when I was growing up, my mom worked and she was a bank teller. And most of my friends in the small town I grew up in, their moms worked at the bank or the insurance company. So that was her career. Mm-hmm. Now today, a bank teller would be looked at more as an entry level or a stepping stone position. So if you have some of those positions that you're having a lot of turnover in, really take a good look at what that position is. And is it a stepping stone position? Is it a position that you just have to be resolved to the fact that we are going to have turnover in this position and it's okay as long as we retain the employees within the organization? So let's say they start at that position as a bank teller, but we are leading and developing and grooming and growing this employee. And before we know it, they're ready to be a personal banker. So that would be another thing I would look at, would just be to really identify those positions that you're having turnover and identify what you can do to retain them. And again, if you need more suggestions, we have lots of them. So absolutely feel free to reach out after.
Yeah, great. And this is a good segue question. Then Hannah, I'll get back to your question for sure. But it says, what are some best practices for retaining those at a higher level when it gets to a point where there are fewer positions available for promotions? This would probably be the position right under manager.
Yes. Okay. And this happens a lot because when you get into organizations where you've got a lot of entry level or mid-level positions, but then as you get higher, you've got fewer director, VP, things like that. There are some strategies that you can put in place to retain. The best strategy that I know of is to continue to develop and grow that employee. Mm-hmm. So continue to have those conversations about what their career aspirations are, continue to feed them knowledge, continue to support them, whether it is taking a course, whether it is, joining some sort of an association with their peers, but continue to feed them. And also there are things within an organization that you can do to give someone more responsibility or without giving them the title. So start having them lead team meetings. Start having them, present on new topics. Start having them, so give them a sense of what the next level would look like before they get the title. Have them act as if, so that you can groom them and see how they, are interfacing with people at the organization when they get more responsibility.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that. And then let's go up to Hannah's question. This is the last one that we have right now, but as we're answering this question, you guys, if you have any other thoughts or comments, let's go ahead and plug that in, then we can answer that after Hannah. So Hannah is asking, is mobile recruiting better than email or phone calls in terms of recruiting?
Yes, so that's a great question. I would say not necessarily better, but should definitely be an opt-in. A couple things. People want to be able to apply for jobs right from their phone. They want to be able to fill out the application, upload their resume. Their phone is with them 24 hours a day. So if you have a platform that you have mobile technology available, I think that's amazing. You can get the jobs that you have available out to more candidates. Their response time is going to be faster. But I still think that it should be in combination with email, phone calls, and all of that. Nothing is ever going to replace face-to-face and another human on the other end of the phone, but we are seeing that people do like to have that mobile technology, at least to reply and send their resumes in and be able to fill out that initial application.
Yeah, that's a great response. Yeah. Anybody have anything else? I'll go ahead and move into our conclusion, but if you do, go ahead and throw that in there. I'll go ahead and also put our information, and there's Diane's information too, which is really, really helpful. But our website has a lot of resources. So if your staff, if your managers, or if you are a manager and you're looking for something a little deeper, please contact us. But we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We had a great turnout, and we hope to do these on a regular basis. You can also order the Staying Power book. It's awesome, and it's a really easy read too, and it's super applicable to your situation at your job, so and also in life, to be honest. If you'd like to sign up for our newsletter, it is crescendostrategies.com. And then we have a YouTube channel that you can follow. You can go into our LinkedIn profile, follow Cara Silletto as well. She's great at posting things with Crescendo Strategies. So use your resources while you have them. And thanks so much, Dianne, for joining us, and everyone else as well.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.